A millionaire goes undercover at his own warehouse. When a cruel manager humiliates him in front of everyone, only one woman stands up for him, and what happens next will change both their lives forever. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. The warehouse floor of Hartwell Logistics was chaos in motion. Forklifts beeped. Conveyor belts hummed. Workers in faded company t-shirts hauled boxes, scanned barcodes, and shouted to each other over the constant drone of machinery. The Detroit facility was one of the largest in the Midwest, processing thousands of packages every hour. And somewhere in the middle of it all, pushing a cart loaded with boxes, was a billionaire. Nathan Hartwell didn't look like a man worth $2.3 billion. His jeans were worn at the knees. His company t-shirt was faded from too many washes. His work boots were scuffed and dusty. He had a 3-day stubble and the tired eyes of someone who'd been working the night shift for weeks, which he had. No one suspected a thing. To everyone at the Detroit facility, he was just Nate Cole, the quiet new guy on the loading dock. He showed up on time, did his work without complaint, and kept mostly to himself. He was polite but forgettable, exactly what Nathan wanted to be. This was the 3rd week of his undercover stint. Every year, Nathan spent time working at different Hartwell facilities, blending in with the regular employees. It was a tradition his father had started decades ago, back when Hartwell Logistics was just a handful of trucks and a dream. A company is only as good as how it treats its lowest paid worker, his father used to say. You want to know what's really happening? Get your hands dirty. Nathan had taken those words to heart. Even after his father passed away 2 years ago and left him the entire empire, Nathan continued the tradition. It was how he'd discovered embezzlement at the Phoenix facility, how he'd learned about safety violations in Atlanta, how he'd identified the managers who treated their workers like human beings and the ones who treated them like machines. The Detroit facility had been on his radar for months. Employee satisfaction scores had plummeted. Turnover was up 40%. Complaints to HR had tripled. Something was wrong, and Nathan needed to see it for himself. He was starting to understand what that something was. Nate! Heads up! Nathan caught the roll of packing tape that came flying toward him, tossed by Marcus, a heavy-set man in his 50s who'd worked at Hartwell for 20 years. Thanks, Nathan said. No problem. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. You hear about the meeting? What meeting? New regional managers calling in all staff. Mandatory. In about 20 minutes. Marcus shook his head. 3rd one this month. This lady loves the sound of her own voice. Nathan had heard about the new regional manager, Victoria Sinclair. Hired by the corporate office 6 months ago while Nathan was traveling overseas. He'd seen her numbers. Efficiency was up, but so was everything else. Turnover, complaints, stress-related medical leaves. He'd been waiting for a chance to observe her in action. Guess we'd better wrap up then, Nathan said. Guess we'd better. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Stick close to me, Nate. This one's a real piece of work. 20 minutes later, the entire warehouse staff, nearly 200 people, was gathered in the main staging area. The conveyor belts had been stopped. The forklifts were parked. Everyone stood in tired clusters, waiting. Nathan positioned himself near the back, where he could observe without being noticed. He scanned the crowd, looking for faces he recognized from his weeks on the floor. There was Marcus, arms crossed, looking skeptical. There was Darnell, the young guy who was always listening to music through one earbud. There was old Mrs. Patterson, who'd worked the packing line for 30 years and knew more about logistics than most of the managers. And there, near the middle of the crowd, was Emma Reyes. Nathan had noticed Emma during his first week. It was hard not to. She was efficient, quick-handed, always helping struggling co-workers without being asked. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, warm brown eyes, and a face that looked tired but kind. He'd learned pieces of her story over the weeks. Single mother, twin boys, age 6. Night shift, so she could be with her kids during the day. Husband died in a car accident 3 years ago. She never complained, never called in sick, never caused problems. She was exactly the kind of worker Nathan valued most, and from what he could tell, she was barely surviving. The crowd stirred as a woman strode onto the elevated platform at the front of the staging area. Victoria Sinclair was everything her reputation suggested. Tall, impeccably dressed in a designer blazer and heels that had no business being in a warehouse. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was all sharp angles and sharper expressions. She carried herself like someone who believed she was the most important person in any room. And based on the way she looked at the assembled workers like they were something stuck to the bottom of her expensive shoes, she clearly thought she was better than all of them. "Good evening," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I'll keep this brief because I know you all have work to do." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "As you know, I've been reviewing operations at this facility for the past several months. And I have to be honest with you, I'm not impressed." A ripple of tension moved through the crowd. Nathan saw Marcus shake his head slightly. "Efficiency numbers are below target. Error rates are above acceptable levels. Frankly, this facility is underperforming, and that reflects poorly on all of us." Victoria began pacing the platform, her heels clicking against the concrete. "Starting tomorrow, we're implementing new protocols. Break times will be reduced from 15 minutes to 10. Quotas will be increased by 20%. Any worker who fails to meet the new standards will receive a written warning. 3 warnings and you're terminated." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Nathan saw several workers exchange panicked looks. The quotas were already brutal. A 20% increase was practically impossible. Additionally, Victoria continued, raising her voice over the noise, "I've noticed a troubling pattern of workers taking extended breaks, socializing on company time, and generally lacking the urgency this job requires. That ends now. If I see anyone wasting time, there will be consequences." She paused, scanning the crowd with cold eyes. "Any questions?" The staging area was silent. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Nathan looked around at his co-workers, people he'd come to know over the past 3 weeks. Hard workers, good people, people who were already stretched to their limits. And now this woman wanted to push them even harder, with no consideration for their well-being. He couldn't stay silent. "I have a question." Every head turned toward him. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she tried to locate the speaker. "Who said that?" she demanded. Nathan stepped forward slightly, enough to be visible. "I did." Victoria studied him, taking in his worn clothes and dusty appearance. Her lip curled almost imperceptibly. "And you are?" "Nate Cole, loading dock." "Well, Mr. Cole from the loading dock." Victoria's voice dripped with condescension. "What's your question?" Nathan kept his voice calm and measured. "The current quotas are already difficult to meet consistently. A 20% increase combined with shorter breaks is likely to result in more errors, not fewer. Workers will be rushing, making mistakes, burning out. You might see short-term gains, but long-term, you're going to lose good people." The staging area was dead silent. No one could believe the quiet new guy was talking back to the regional manager. Victoria's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, did I ask for your opinion on management strategy?" "You asked if there were questions. I'm pointing out a potential problem with the new protocols." "A potential problem?" Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. And what makes you qualified to identify problems with protocols designed by people with actual management experience? Nathan felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his composure. I've been here 3 weeks. I've watched these people work. They're already giving everything they have. Pushing them harder isn't going to make them more productive. It's going to break them. Victoria stepped to the edge of the platform, looking down at Nathan like he was an insect she was considering crushing. Let me make something clear to you, Mr. Cole. Her voice was ice. You push boxes for a living. You don't have a degree. You don't have management training. You don't have any understanding of how a business actually operates. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. You are nobody. You are useless. When I want the opinion of someone who actually matters, I'll ask for it. Until then, I suggest you keep your mouth shut and do the one simple job you were hired to do, if you're even capable of that. The words hung in the air like poison. Nathan felt 200 pairs of eyes on him. Some looked sympathetic, others looked relieved it wasn't them. A few, Victoria's apparent favorites, were smirking. He could end this right now. One phone call and Victoria Sinclair would be escorted out of the building. He could reveal himself, watch her face crumble, and fire her on the spot. But that wouldn't solve the problem. Victoria was a symptom, not the disease. If Nathan revealed himself now, he'd never find out how deep the rot went. He'd never understand why the corporate office had hired someone like her in the first place. So he swallowed his anger and simply nodded. Understood, he said quietly. Victoria smiled, triumphant. Good. Anyone else have questions? Silence. Excellent. Get back to work and remember, I'm watching. She strode off the platform and disappeared into the management offices, leaving behind a demoralized workforce and a simmering tension that Nathan could feel in his bones. Slowly, the crowd dispersed. Workers returned to their stations, their movements heavy with resignation. The conveyor belts hummed back to life. The forklifts beeped and rolled. Nathan stood where he was, still processing what had just happened. He'd been insulted before. He'd been underestimated, dismissed, even mocked. But there was something about Victoria's cruelty, the way she'd enjoyed humiliating him in front of everyone, that struck a nerve he didn't know he had. Hey. The voice was soft, hesitant. Nathan turned to find Emma Reyes standing a few feet away. She looked uncomfortable, like she wasn't sure she should be approaching him. Are you okay? She asked. Nathan blinked, surprised. Everyone else had hurried back to work, eager to avoid being associated with the guy who'd just been publicly destroyed. But Emma had stayed. I'm fine, he said, though his voice was rougher than he intended. That was awful. Emma's brown eyes were filled with genuine concern. What she said to you, it wasn't right. You were just trying to help. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Emma stepped closer, lowering her voice. You were right, you know, about the quotas. They're already impossible. Last month, 3 people quit because they couldn't keep up. And now she wants to make it worse. Nathan studied her face. There was no fear there, no calculation, just honest indignation on behalf of someone she barely knew. You're not worried about being seen talking to me? He asked. The useless guy from the loading dock? Emma's expression softened into something almost like a smile. I've been called worse. And for what it's worth, you're not useless. Anyone who's worked with you knows that. Nathan felt something shift in his chest. It was small, barely perceptible, but it was there. Thanks, he said. That means a lot. Emma nodded, then glanced toward the conveyor belts. I should get back, but if you ever need someone to complain to, I'm usually on the packing line. Section C. Section C, got it. She started to walk away, then paused and looked back. I'm Emma, by the way. Emma Reyes. Nate, he said. Nate Cole. Nice to meet you, Nate, despite the circumstances. And then she was gone, disappearing into the controlled chaos of the warehouse floor. Nathan watched her go, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: interest, curiosity, connection. He shook his head, trying to refocus. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to find out what was wrong with this facility and fix it. But as he returned to his cart of boxes, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma Reyes, the woman who had shown him kindness when everyone else had looked away. The rest of the shift was brutal. Victoria's new protocols hadn't officially started yet, but her message had been received. Everyone worked faster, harder, barely stopping to breathe. The fear in the air was palpable. Nathan pushed through his tasks on autopilot, his mind churning. He observed everything. The way supervisors snapped at workers who paused for even a second. The way people helped each other less, too focused on their own quotas to spare any energy. The way the camaraderie he'd noticed in his first weeks was slowly being replaced by exhausted isolation. This wasn't a workplace. It was a pressure cooker. During his shortened break, Nathan found himself wandering toward Section C. He told himself he was just observing, gathering information. But when he spotted Emma at her station, methodically packing boxes with practiced efficiency, he changed course and approached. "How's it going?" he asked, leaning against a support beam. Emma looked up, surprised but not displeased to see him. "About as well as you'd expect. Everyone's terrified. I noticed. The thing is, most of these people can't afford to lose this job." Emma's hands never stopped moving as she talked, sealing boxes and applying labels. "They have families, bills, responsibilities. Victoria knows that. She's counting on it." Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she knows we're trapped. Where else are we going to go? There aren't a lot of jobs in Detroit that pay this well with benefits. She can treat us however she wants because she knows we can't fight back." The bitterness in Emma's voice was unmistakable. Nathan had seen it in other facilities, but never this raw, never this personal. "That's not how it's supposed to be," he said quietly. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Supposed to be? Nate, this is how it is. The people at the top make the rules and the rest of us just try to survive." Nathan wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that the people at the top, or at least this person at the top, cared about more than profits. That he was going to fix this, but he couldn't. Not yet. "Maybe things will change," he said instead. Emma shook her head, but her expression softened slightly. "You're an optimist. That's rare around here. Is that a bad thing?" "No, it's just unexpected." They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Nathan helping Emma move finished boxes onto a cart. It wasn't his job, but no one seemed to notice or care. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said finally. "Sure. Why are you here?" Nathan's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. "You don't talk like most of the guys on the loading dock. You don't act like them either. You're polite, you're thoughtful, and you stood up to Victoria when everyone else just looked at their shoes. So why are you working in a warehouse?" Nathan forced himself to stay calm. Sometimes people end up places they didn't expect to be. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." Emma studied him for a long moment, her brown eyes searching his face. Nathan felt exposed, like she could see right through his carefully constructed facade. Finally, she shrugged. "Okay, keep your secrets. But if you ever want to talk..." "Section C. I remember." Emma smiled, a real smile this time, tired but genuine. Section C. The rest of the shift passed slowly. Nathan finished his tasks and clocked out with everyone else, trudging toward the employee parking lot in the gray pre-dawn light. He was almost to his truck, an old Ford he'd bought specifically for this undercover stint, when he noticed Emma standing by a beat-up Honda Civic staring at the front tire. It was completely flat. "Problem?" Nathan asked, approaching. Emma sighed, rubbing her forehead. "The universe apparently decided I haven't had a bad enough night. I don't have a spare. The last one was used 6 months ago and I never replaced it." "Want me to call someone?" "Who? A tow truck at 6 a.m. would cost more than I make in a day." She leaned against the car, looking utterly defeated. "I'll figure it out, I always do." Nathan looked at her. This woman who had shown him kindness when no one else would, who was now stranded in a parking lot after working a 10-hour shift, who probably had 2 little boys waiting for her at home. "Let me give you a ride," he said. Emma's eyes widened. "I couldn't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask. I offered. But you don't even know where I live. I could be way out of your way." "I don't have anywhere to be." Emma hesitated, clearly torn. Nathan could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. She wanted to say yes. She just didn't want to be a burden. "Please," he added, "and let me help." Something in his voice must have convinced her. She sighed and nodded. "Okay, but just this once." The drive to Emma's apartment took about 20 minutes. They talked easily, the conversation flowing in a way that surprised them both. Emma told him about her twins, Marco and Lucas, about their different personalities and their shared love of dinosaurs. Nathan found himself laughing at her stories, genuinely engaged in a way he hadn't been in years. "What about you?" Emma asked as they neared her neighborhood. "Any kids?" "No." Nathan shook his head. "I was married once. It didn't work out. I'm sorry." "Don't be. She wanted someone I couldn't be." He paused, realizing he'd said more than he intended. "Or maybe I was someone she couldn't see, I don't know. It's complicated." Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It always is." They pulled up in front of a modest apartment building. The paint was peeling in places and the parking lot had more potholes than pavement, but it was clean and well lit. "This is me," Emma said, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Thank you, Nate. Really. No problem?" She opened the door, then paused. "You know, for a useless guy, you're pretty decent." Nathan laughed despite himself. "High praise. Take it while you can get it." Emma smiled and climbed out of the truck. "See you tomorrow night?" "I'll be there." He watched her walk to the building entrance, waited until she was safely inside, and then sat in the parking lot for a long moment, processing everything. Victoria Sinclair had called him useless, had humiliated him in front of 200 people, had made it clear that she saw the warehouse workers as nothing more than expendable resources. But Emma Reyes had seen something else. She'd seen a person worth defending, worth helping, worth knowing. Nathan pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. He'd been documenting everything since he started: observations, concerns, evidence of mismanagement. Tonight, he added a new section: Victoria Sinclair, hostile work environment, public humiliation of staff, implementing unrealistic quotas, ruling through fear. Recommend immediate termination. He paused, then added, Emma Reyes, exceptional worker, natural leader, respected by peers. Investigate. Financial struggles, single mother, may need support. Possible candidate for management training program. He stared at the second note for a long time before closing the app. He shouldn't be getting personally involved. He was here to observe and fix systemic problems, not to rescue individual employees. That wasn't how this worked. But something about Emma Reyes made him want to break his own rules. As he drove back to the modest apartment he'd rented for his undercover stint, Nathan made a decision. He would stay at the Detroit facility longer than he'd originally planned. He needed to document more of Victoria's behavior before he could justify removing her. He needed to understand the full scope of the problems. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted to see where this connection with Emma might lead. It was dangerous. It was stupid. It was exactly the kind of emotional entanglement he'd spent his whole life avoiding. But for the first time in years, Nathan Hartwell felt something other than the cold weight of responsibility. He felt hope. And as the sun rose over Detroit, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, he allowed himself to imagine a future that looked different from the lonely one he'd resigned himself to. Little did he know that the road ahead would be far more complicated and far more painful than anything he could have imagined. But it would also lead him to the one thing he'd never known he was missing: love. What did you think of Victoria's cruelty and Emma's kindness? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The next 2 weeks at Hartwell Logistics felt like a slow-motion disaster. Victoria's new protocols went into effect immediately. Break times were slashed. Quotas were raised. Supervisors prowled the floor like prison guards, writing up anyone who paused for longer than a few seconds. The warehouse, once filled with the easy banter of co-workers who'd known each other for years, became silent except for the machinery. People worked with their heads down, eyes fixed on their tasks, too exhausted and afraid to speak. Nathan documented everything. He filled notebooks with observations, timestamps of unreasonable demands, names of workers who'd been written up for minor infractions. Quotes from supervisors who seemed to enjoy enforcing Victoria's rules. He photographed the new quota boards, the reduced break schedules, the warning notices posted on every wall. But he also watched Emma. He couldn't help it. She was everywhere he looked, not because she sought attention, but because she was constantly helping others. When old Mrs. Patterson struggled to keep up with the new pace, Emma quietly took over part of her workload. When Darnell got written up for being 2 minutes late from break, Emma spoke to the supervisor on his behalf. She was holding the whole section together through sheer force of will, and it was clearly taking a toll. Nathan noticed the dark circles under her eyes growing darker. He noticed her hands shaking slightly during the final hours of each shift. He noticed her skipping meals, claiming she wasn't hungry when he knew the truth was that she was saving money. One night he overheard her on the phone during break. "I know, Mama, I know, I'll figure it out." Her voice was strained, barely holding together. "Tell Marco I love him. Tell him I'll be home soon. Yes, Lucas too. I love you. Bye." She hung up and pressed her hands to her face, taking deep breaths. Nathan approached carefully. "Everything okay?" Emma jumped, startled. When she saw it was him, she relaxed slightly, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. "Fine. Just family stuff. Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's nothing you can help with. Just the usual single mom chaos." Nathan wanted to push, but he could see she wasn't ready, so he simply nodded and changed the subject. "You know, you don't have to carry everyone else's weight. You're going to burn yourself out." Emma laughed tiredly. "Someone has to. Mrs. Patterson's been here 30 years. She doesn't deserve to get fired because some corporate robot decided the quotas weren't high enough. And what about you? What do you deserve?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at him for a long moment, her brown eyes searching his face. "I don't think about what I deserve," she said finally. "I think about what my boys need. That's enough." Nathan felt something twist in his chest. Here was a woman who gave everything to everyone else and asked for nothing in return, who worked herself to exhaustion so her children could have a slightly better life, who had more dignity and grace than half the executives Nathan had ever met, and she was drowning. That night after his shift ended, Nathan didn't go home. Instead, he drove to the 24-hour grocery store near Emma's apartment. He bought gift cards, grocery store, gas station, the pharmacy down the street. He put them in a plain envelope with no note, no explanation. Then he drove to her apartment building and slipped the envelope under her door. It wasn't much. A few $100s wouldn't solve her problems, but maybe it would ease the pressure just a little. The next night at work, Nathan watched Emma from across the warehouse floor. She seemed slightly less tense, slightly less frayed around the edges. He saw her tell Mrs. Patterson that she'd found some extra money and could cover her share of the coffee fund for the month. She had no idea where the gift cards came from, and Nathan intended to keep it that way. Over the following days, he found other ways to help. He noticed Emma's car was still sitting in the parking lot with its flat tire. She'd been taking the bus to work, adding an hour to her commute each way. One morning after Emma's shift ended and she'd left on the bus, Nathan called a local mechanic and paid to have the tire replaced and the car serviced. When Emma arrived at work the next night, she stood in the parking lot staring at her car in disbelief. "Someone fixed it," she told Nathan, her voice full of wonder. "Someone fixed my car and left the keys under the mat. There was a note that just said, 'Take care of yourself.'" "That's weird," Nathan said, keeping his face neutral. "Any idea who?" "No clue, but I'm not complaining." She shook her head, smiling. "Maybe there are still good people in the world. Maybe there are." Nathan felt a warmth spread through his chest, a satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. Not the satisfaction of closing a deal or seeing profits rise, the satisfaction of making someone's life just a little bit easier. It was addictive. He started leaving small things in Emma's locker, a gift card to the coffee shop she liked, a note with an encouraging quote, a package of her favorite snacks. He was careful, always anonymous, always untraceable. Emma mentioned the mysterious gifts to him with a mix of confusion and gratitude. "I think I have a secret admirer," she joked one night during break. "Either that or someone's trying to fatten me up before they kidnap me." Nathan laughed. "Probably the admirer theory. But who? Everyone here is either married, ancient, or—" She glanced at him, then quickly looked away. "Never mind." "Or what?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But Nathan noticed the slight blush on her cheeks, and he filed that information away with everything else he'd learned about Emma Reyes. Victoria Sinclair, meanwhile, had noticed something too. She'd noticed that Nathan and Emma seemed to talk more than strictly necessary, that they took their breaks at the same time, that there was an easy familiarity between them that didn't fit the desperate, isolated atmosphere she'd worked so hard to create. Victoria didn't like it. "Mr. Cole," she said one evening, appearing beside Nathan's station like a designer-clad ghost. "I've been watching you." Nathan kept his face blank. "Is there a problem?" "That depends." Victoria's eyes were cold. "I've noticed you spending a lot of time with Emma Reyes, talking during breaks, helping her with her work. Is there something going on between you two?" "We're co-workers. We talk. That's not against the rules. Fraternization can be a distraction, and distractions lead to inefficiency." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. "I meet my quotas, so does Emma. I'm not sure what the problem is." Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The problem, Mr. Cole, is that I don't trust you. You speak up when you shouldn't. You act like you're better than your position. And you associate with people who are—" She let the sentence hang, clearly waiting for him to ask. Nathan didn't give her the satisfaction. "People who are what?" he asked flatly. "Weaklings." Victoria's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Emma Reyes is a single mother with constant child care problems. She's distracted, she's exhausted, and she's a liability to this operation. I've been looking for a reason to let her go. Don't give me one by association. It took every ounce of Nathan's self-control not to reveal himself right then and there. He wanted to tell Victoria exactly who she was threatening. He wanted to watch her face crumble as she realized she'd just called the company owner useless and threatened to fire his what? His friend? His interest? His something? Instead, he simply nodded. Understood. Victoria studied him for a moment longer, then walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Nathan watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Emma was not a weak link. Emma was the strongest person in this entire facility, and Victoria was going to pay for every cruel word she'd ever spoken. But not yet. Nathan needed more evidence. He needed to understand the full scope of Victoria's misconduct before he could act. And he needed to keep Emma safe in the meantime. That night, Nathan found Emma in the break room, sitting alone at a table with her head in her hands. "Hey," he said softly, sliding into the chair across from her. "What's wrong?" Emma looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "Marco's school called," she said, her voice thick. "My son. He's been having trouble, acting out, can't focus, getting into fights. They want him tested for ADHD. They're recommending special support services, therapy, the whole thing. That sounds like it could help. It could, if I could afford it." Emma laughed bitterly. "The testing alone is $800. The therapy would be $200 a week. And the special support services? Those are only available at private schools that cost more than I make in a year." Nathan felt his heart clench. "Emma, I work 60 hours a week." Her voice broke. "I haven't bought myself new clothes in 3 years. I eat ramen for dinner so my kids can have real food. And it's still not enough. It's never enough." Tears were streaming down her face now. She wiped at them angrily, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you. You have your own problems." "Stop." Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. "Stop apologizing. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to be overwhelmed. That doesn't make you weak." Emma stared at their joined hands, then at his face. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." It was the same question she had asked before, and Nathan still didn't have an answer he could give her. "Because you're the only person in this place who treats people like they matter," he said finally. "Because when Victoria humiliated me in front of everyone, you were the only one who came to check on me. Because you deserve someone who cares about what happens to you." Emma was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't remember what that feels like. Having someone care." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Then let me remind you." They sat like that for a while, hands linked across the break room table, not speaking. Outside, the warehouse hummed and churned, but in that small room there was only the two of them. Finally, Emma pulled her hand away and wiped her eyes. "I should get back to work. Victoria's been watching me like a hawk lately." "I know, she mentioned it." Emma's eyes widened. "She talked to you about me?" "She thinks you're a weak link." Nathan couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "She's looking for a reason to fire you." "Of course she is." Emma stood up, straightening her shirt. "I'm a single mom who occasionally has to leave early when my kids are sick. That's unacceptable to someone like her." "It's not unacceptable, it's human. Human doesn't pay the bills, Nate." Emma headed for the door, then paused. "But thanks. For listening, for caring. Anytime." She left and Nathan sat alone in the break room, his mind racing. He needed to act faster. Victoria was circling Emma like a shark, waiting for any excuse to strike. And Nathan couldn't protect her from the shadows forever. That weekend, Nathan did something he'd never done before during an undercover stint. He went to Emma's apartment. Not inside, that would be crossing a line. But he drove to her neighborhood and parked across the street, just watching. He told himself he was assessing her living situation, gathering information about her circumstances. But the truth was, he just wanted to be near her. He saw her emerge from the building around noon, holding the hands of two small boys. The twins were identical, dark hair, bright eyes, boundless energy. They pulled Emma in different directions, chattering excitedly about something Nathan couldn't hear. Emma looked different outside of work, younger, lighter, despite the obvious exhaustion. She laughed at something one of the boys said, scooping him up and spinning him around while the other one jumped up and down, demanding his turn. Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Something profound and terrifying. He was falling in love with her. The realization hit him like a truck. He, Nathan Hartwell, billionaire CEO, was falling in love with a warehouse worker he'd known for less than a month. A woman who didn't know his real name. A woman he'd been lying to since the moment they met. This was a disaster. He should pull out now, reveal himself to the board, have Victoria removed, and disappear from Emma's life before things got more complicated. That was the smart play, the safe play. But Nathan had spent his entire life making the smart, safe play. And where had it gotten him? A failed marriage, an empty penthouse, a company worth billions, and not a single person who knew the real him. Emma knew the real him, or at least the version of him that mattered, the version that showed up every day, worked hard, and treated people with respect. The version that wasn't defined by money or power or family legacy. The version he wanted to be. Nathan started the truck and drove away, his decision made. He would stay. He would protect Emma however he could. And when the time was right, he would tell her the truth and pray that she could forgive him. It was the riskiest play he'd ever made. But some things were worth the risk. The following week, Nathan escalated his anonymous help. He found out which after-school program Emma's twins attended and made an anonymous donation to cover their fees for the next 6 months. He learned the name of Marco's school and arranged for a private evaluation by a child psychologist, paid in full, with a letter explaining that Marco had been selected for a community outreach program. Emma mentioned these miracles to him with growing wonder. "Someone paid for my kids' after-school care," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. 6 months. Just like that. And now there's this program offering free ADHD testing for Marco. It's like someone's watching over us. "Maybe someone is," Nathan said carefully. Emma looked at him sharply. "Do you know something?" "I just mean, maybe the universe is finally giving you a break. You deserve one." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Nathan kept his expression neutral, but he felt exposed under her gaze. "You're hiding something," Emma said finally. "I don't know what it is, but I can tell. Everyone hides something. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." Emma sighed, but she didn't push further. "Fine. Keep your secrets, but Nate." She stepped closer. Close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean. "Whoever you really are, whatever you're not telling me, I trust you. I don't know why, but I do." Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. "You probably shouldn't." "Maybe not, but I do anyway." Before he could respond, the break room door swung open. Victoria strode in, her eyes immediately finding them standing close together. "Am I interrupting something?" Victoria's voice was ice. Emma stepped back quickly. "No, ma'am, just finishing our break." "Your break ended 2 minutes ago. That's a written warning for both of you." Victoria's smile was sharp. "And Miss Reyes, I'd like to see you in my office before the end of your shift. We need to discuss your performance." Emma's face went pale, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria turned and left. Nathan watched her go, his mind racing. This was it. Victoria was making her move, and Nathan had to decide how far he was willing to go to stop her. "Nate." Emma's voice was small. "She's going to fire me, I can feel it. She can't fire you without cause. She'll find a cause. She'll make one up if she has to." Emma's hands were shaking. "God, what am I going to do? I can't lose this job. The health insurance alone, Marco's evaluation, Lucas's checkups." "Emma." Nathan took her hands in his, steadying them. "Listen to me, you're not going to lose your job. I won't let that happen. How can you stop it? You're just a—" She trailed off, something flickering in her eyes. "You're just a warehouse worker. Like me." The lie sat heavy on Nathan's tongue, but this wasn't the moment for truth. This was the moment for action. "Trust me," he said. "Can you do that?" Emma held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I trust you." Nathan squeezed her hands, then let go. "Go back to work. Do everything by the book. Don't give her any ammunition, and when she calls you to her office, stay calm. Agree to nothing. Sign nothing." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done weeks ago." Nathan walked out of the break room, his mind made up. He'd wanted to gather more evidence. He'd wanted to understand the full scope of the problems at the Detroit facility. He'd wanted to be thorough, methodical, careful. But Victoria was about to destroy an innocent woman to prove a point, and Nathan couldn't let that happen. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in weeks. "This is Nathan Hartwell. I need you to get me everything we have on Victoria Sinclair, her hiring records, her performance reviews, every complaint that's been filed against her, and I need it in the next 2 hours." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, are you ending the undercover operation?" Nathan looked back toward the warehouse floor where Emma was returning to her station, her shoulders tight with fear. "Not yet," he said. "But I'm about to change the game." He hung up and made another call. "This is Hartwell. I need a meeting with the board tomorrow morning. Emergency session. No, it can't wait. Just make it happen." By the time Emma's shift ended, Nathan had set everything in motion. He didn't know how it would play out. He didn't know if Emma would forgive him when she learned the truth. He didn't know if they had any kind of future together. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Victoria Sinclair was about to learn what happened when you called the wrong man useless, and Emma Reyes was about to learn that she was worth fighting for. What do you think of Nathan's secret help for Emma? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. Nathan had spent the entire night reviewing the files his assistant had sent over. Victoria Sinclair's employment record, her performance reviews. The complaints filed against her, 17 in 6 months, all dismissed by her direct supervisor, who Nathan now suspected was either complicit or incompetent. The picture that emerged was damning. Victoria had been hired by the regional VP, a man named Charles Whitmore, whom Nathan had never particularly trusted. Her credentials were impressive on paper, but her track record told a different story. At her previous company, she'd been forced out after a hostile work environment lawsuit. At the one before that, employee turnover had tripled during her tenure. She was a predator. And somehow she'd slipped through Hartwell's hiring process and landed at one of their largest facilities. Nathan made a note to investigate Whitmore next. But first, he had to deal with Victoria. The board meeting was held via video conference. Nathan had claimed to be traveling, which wasn't entirely a lie. He sat in his rented apartment wearing a dress shirt and tie from the neck up, cargo pants and work boots below the frame. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the 5 faces on his screen, I've called this meeting because I've uncovered serious misconduct at our Detroit facility. He shared his screen and walked them through the evidence. The unrealistic quotas, the slashed break times, the 17 dismissed complaints, the hostile work environment that was driving away good employees and destroying morale. "This is concerning," said Margaret Chen, the board's most senior member. "But Nathan, you've been at this facility for weeks. Why are you only bringing this to us now?" "Because I wanted to be thorough, and because I wanted to give Victoria Sinclair the chance to show me something redeemable." Nathan paused. "She didn't." "What are you recommending?" asked another board member. "Immediate termination, a full investigation into Charles Whitmore's role in her hiring, and a comprehensive review of our HR practices to ensure this doesn't happen again." The board discussed. They debated. They raised concerns about legal liability and PR implications. Finally, Margaret spoke again. "Nathan, we trust your judgment. If you believe Victoria Sinclair needs to go, we'll support that decision. But I'd recommend doing it cleanly. Document everything, have HR present, follow every protocol to the letter." "That's the plan." "And the undercover operation? Are you ending it?" Nathan hesitated. The smart move would be to reveal himself, fire Victoria personally, and return to his normal life. Clean break. No complications. But then he thought of Emma, of the way she looked at him, at Nate, like he was someone worth knowing, of the trust she'd placed in him, a trust he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. He wasn't ready to give that up. Not yet. "I'm staying a bit longer," he said. "There are still things I need to understand about this facility, and I want to make sure the transition goes smoothly after Victoria is removed." Margaret nodded slowly. "Just be careful, Nathan. Undercover operations have a way of getting complicated." She had no idea how right she was. After the meeting ended, Nathan changed back into his warehouse clothes and headed to work. His shift didn't start for another 4 hours, but he needed to check on something. He needed to check on Emma. He found her in the employee parking lot, sitting in her newly repaired car, staring at nothing. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but she hadn't gone home. Nathan knocked on the window. Emma jumped, then relaxed when she saw who it was. She rolled down the window. "Hey. Hey, you okay?" "Not really." Emma's voice was hollow. "Victoria called me into her office last night after you left." Nathan felt his stomach drop. "What happened?" "She put me on a performance improvement plan." Emma laughed bitterly. 3 months of increased scrutiny, any mistake, any infraction, and I'm done. She made it very clear that she expects me to fail. That's retaliation. You could file a complaint. With who? HR? They're in Victoria's pocket. Everyone knows it. Nathan clenched his jaw. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that Victoria wouldn't be a problem for much longer. But he couldn't explain how he knew that without revealing everything. "Emma, listen to me. I know things look bad right now, but I promise you this isn't going to end the way Victoria thinks it will." Emma turned to look at him, her eyes red from crying. "How do you know that?" "I just do. Trust me." "You keep saying that." Emma shook her head slowly. "Trust you, but Nate, I don't even know who you are, not really." The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut, because she was right. She didn't know who he was, and that was entirely his fault. "You know the parts that matter," he said quietly. "Do I?" Emma's voice cracked. "Because sometimes I look at you and I see this depth, like there's a whole other person hiding behind your eyes. And I don't understand why you're here, why someone like you is pushing boxes in a warehouse." Nathan didn't answer. He couldn't. Emma sighed and opened her car door, stepping out to stand face to face with him. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the parking lot in shades of gold and pink. "I'm too tired to play games," she said. "So I'm just going to say this. I like you, Nate, more than I should, more than makes sense. And I don't know if that's real or if I'm just lonely and desperate and clinging to the first person who's been kind to me in years." Nathan's heart was pounding. "Emma, let me finish." She took a breath. "I've been hurt before, not just by losing Diego, but by people who made promises they couldn't keep. People who said they'd be there and then disappeared. I can't go through that again. My boys can't go through that again. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. But what happens when you get tired of this place? When you decide warehouse work isn't for you? When you move on to whatever it is you're really supposed to be doing with your life?" Nathan stepped closer, close enough to see the tears glistening in her eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. "What if this is what I'm supposed to be doing?" he asked. "What if I'm exactly where I'm meant to be?" Emma shook her head. "You can't know that. Neither can you. Neither can anyone." Nathan reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel like myself. Not the person everyone expects me to be. Not the person I've spent my whole life pretending to be, just me." Emma's breath caught. "Nate, I know I'm hiding things. I know you have every reason not to trust me, but what I feel for you, that's not hidden. That's the most honest thing about me." He should stop. He should pull away, tell her the truth, accept whatever consequences followed. Instead, he kissed her. It started soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Emma's hands came up to grip his shirt, when she pulled him closer instead of pushing him away, the kiss deepened into something fierce and desperate. All the weeks of tension, of longing, of carefully maintained distance, it all dissolved in that moment. There was only Emma, warm and real in his arms, only the taste of her lips and the sound of her breath and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "That was," Emma started. "Yeah," Nathan agreed. She laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I didn't expect that. Neither did I." He pressed his forehead against hers. "Emma, I know this is complicated. I know there are things I haven't told you, but I want you to know that whatever happens next, what just happened was real. This is real." Emma pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "I believe you. God help me, but I believe you. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet." She smiled, a real smile, the first one he'd seen from her in days. "Ask me again in a month." They stood there in the parking lot holding each other as the sun rose over Detroit. For a few perfect minutes, the warehouse in Victoria and all the complications didn't exist. There was only them. But reality always has a way of intruding. Nathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. "You should probably get that," Emma said, pulling away reluctantly. Nathan pulled out his phone and froze. 12 missed calls from his assistant, 6 from Margaret Chen, and a text message that made his blood run cold. "Urgent. Security breach. Your identity may have been compromised. Call immediately." "I have to go," Nathan said, his voice tight. Emma frowned. "Is everything okay?" "I don't know. I'll explain later." He kissed her quickly, almost desperately. "Stay safe. Don't trust anyone from management. And whatever happens, remember what I said. This is real." Before she could respond, he was in his truck and pulling out of the parking lot, his mind racing. Someone knew who he was. The question was, who? The answer came 2 hours later in the form of a phone call from his head of security. "We traced the breach," said Reynolds, his voice grim. Someone accessed our personnel database and searched for the name Nathan Cole. When they got no results, they cross-referenced physical descriptions and shift schedules with known executives. Eventually, they found a match. Who made the search? Victoria Sinclair. She used her manager credentials to access systems she shouldn't have had access to. Nathan closed his eyes. Of course, Victoria had been suspicious of him from the start. She'd seen him through his disguise, or at least suspected something was off. Does she know for certain? We can't tell what conclusions she drew. But based on her search pattern, she was definitely looking for information about you specifically. And she found your real employee photo from the corporate database. So she knows. It's likely, sir. Nathan hung up and sat in silence for a long moment, processing. Victoria knew who he was. She knew that the man she'd called useless in front of 200 workers was actually the billionaire owner of the company. She knew that she'd humiliated her own boss. A normal person would be panicking, would be preparing their resignation letter, would be begging for forgiveness. But Victoria Sinclair wasn't a normal person. She was a predator. And predators, when cornered, didn't surrender. They attacked. Nathan's phone rang again. It was a number he didn't recognize, but his instincts told him to answer. Mr. Hartwell. Victoria's voice was smooth as silk, with an undercurrent of barely contained triumph. Or should I say, Nate? Victoria. I was wondering when you'd call. I'm sure you were. He could practically hear her smiling. I have to admit I'm impressed. Playing the working-class hero, slumming it with the peasants. Very method acting of you. Is there a point to this call? The point is that I know your secret, and I think it's time we discussed what that means for both of us. Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression cold. What exactly do you think you have to discuss? Your reputation, for starters. How do you think the press would react to the story of the billionaire who went undercover to spy on his own employees? Some might call it noble. Others might call it creepy, invasive, a violation of trust. I've been doing this for years. It's not a secret, but the specifics are. Victoria's voice hardened. Like how you've been getting particularly close to one employee, Emma Reyes. A single mother, vulnerable, struggling. And here you are, the big bad billionaire, playing Prince Charming while hiding your true identity. That's a story the tabloids would love. Nathan felt ice in his veins. Leave Emma out of this. Oh, but she's central to this, isn't she? I've been watching you too. The longing looks. The secret conversations. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more. Victoria laughed. Did you kiss her, Nathan? Did you make her think you were just a simple warehouse worker who understood her struggles? How do you think she'll feel when she learns the truth? Nathan's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? What I've always wanted. To run this facility my way without interference. You stay out of my business, you keep your little undercover games to yourself, and I forget everything I've learned. And if I refuse? Then I go public. I tell the press about the billionaire who seduced a working-class single mother under false pretenses. I make sure Emma knows exactly who you are and how long you've been lying to her. And I file a complaint with the board about your inappropriate conduct. Nathan was silent for a long moment. Victoria took his silence as hesitation. Think about it, Nathan. Is Emma Reyes really worth destroying your reputation over? Is she worth the scandal, the lawsuits, the public humiliation? You're making a mistake, Nathan said quietly. The only mistake I made was underestimating you. That won't happen again. No. Nathan's voice was ice. Your mistake is thinking I'm afraid of you. Your mistake is thinking I would ever sacrifice someone I care about to protect myself. And your mistake is thinking you have any power here at all. The line went silent. I've been documenting your conduct for weeks, Nathan continued. The hostile work environment, the unrealistic quotas, the 17 complaints you've had dismissed, the retaliation against employees who speak up. I have enough evidence to terminate you for cause and make sure you never work in logistics again. You wouldn't dare. Try me. And Victoria? Nathan leaned forward. If you go anywhere near Emma Reyes, if you say one word to her or about her, I will personally ensure that you face not just termination but criminal charges for harassment and blackmail. Am I making myself clear? There was a long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice had lost some of its confidence. You're bluffing. I never bluff. You have until the end of the week to resign. If you don't, I'll have security escort you out in front of every employee you've terrorized. Your choice. Nathan hung up before she could respond. He sat in silence, his heart pounding. He'd just declared war on Victoria Sinclair, and while he was confident he would win, he knew she wouldn't go down without a fight. The question was, what would she do next? He didn't have to wait long to find out. The next day at work, Nathan noticed something different about Victoria. She was calm, too calm. She smiled at workers she usually ignored. She made pleasant small talk with supervisors she usually berated. It was unnerving. Nathan found Emma at her station working with her usual quiet efficiency. He approached carefully, aware that Victoria might be watching. Hey, he said, how are you? Better? Emma smiled at him, a soft private smile that made his heart ache. After yesterday morning, I mean. About that? Don't. She shook her head. Don't apologize or try to take it back. I meant what I said. I believe you. Nathan wanted to tell her everything right then. Wanted to confess who he was and beg her forgiveness before Victoria could twist the truth. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the security office. I left you a present. Nathan's blood ran cold. I have to go, he said to Emma. I'll explain later, I promise. He walked as quickly as he could without running, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. The security office was in the back of the warehouse, a small room filled with monitors showing feeds from cameras throughout the facility. When Nathan arrived, he found the door unlocked and the room empty. But there was something on the desk, a manila folder thick with papers. Nathan opened it and felt his stomach drop. Inside were photos of him and Emma in the parking lot yesterday morning. Photos of them kissing. Photos that clearly showed his face, his expression, the intimate nature of the moment. There was also a printed document, an official complaint form filled out and signed. Complaint against Nathan Hartwell, CEO, filed by Victoria Sinclair, Regional Manager, allegation sexual harassment of subordinate employee Emma Reyes. Inappropriate relationship conducted under false pretenses, abuse of power and position. Nathan read the complaint, his hands trembling with rage. Victoria had laid it all out, how Nathan had targeted Emma, a vulnerable single mother, how he'd used his disguise to manipulate her emotionally, how he'd engaged in a physical relationship with an employee who had no idea she was being deceived by the company owner. It was twisted, it was malicious, and it was devastatingly effective, because from the outside, stripped of context and intent, it looked exactly like what Victoria was claiming. A powerful man taking advantage of a powerless woman. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten note. You should have taken my deal. Now we both burn. But I'm taking Emma down with us. By the time I'm done, she'll be the woman who slept her way to special treatment. Her reputation will be destroyed. And she'll know exactly who to blame. You have 24 hours to resign, or I release everything. Nathan stared at the note, his mind racing. Victoria wasn't just threatening him anymore. She was threatening Emma. She was planning to destroy an innocent woman just to hurt him. He couldn't let that happen. But he also couldn't stop it without revealing the truth, without showing Emma who he really was and what he'd been hiding. The lie he'd been living was about to collapse, and Emma, the woman he loved, the woman who trusted him, was going to be caught in the wreckage. Nathan pulled out his phone and made a call. "Reynolds, I need you to do something for me. It's urgent." He explained what he needed: evidence, documentation, everything that could prove Victoria's misconduct and clear Emma's name. "How soon can you have it?" he asked. "By tomorrow morning, but sir, that'll have to be enough. And Reynolds, prepare for a press conference. If Victoria wants a war, I'm going to give her one she'll never forget." He hung up and stared at the photos of him and Emma. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either he would save Emma and destroy Victoria, or Victoria would destroy them both. There was no middle ground anymore. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type ice cream in the comments. Only those who've read this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. That night, Nathan didn't go home. He stayed at the warehouse, hiding in the shadows, watching Victoria's every move. She left her office around midnight carrying a briefcase that Nathan suspected contained copies of the photos and complaints. He followed her at a distance as she drove to a 24-hour copy shop, watched through the window as she made duplicates of everything. She was preparing to distribute the evidence, to make sure that even if Nathan stopped her, the damage would already be done. Nathan pulled out his phone and made another call. "It's me. I need you to intercept a package, and I need legal standing by for emergency injunctions. Victoria Sinclair is about to try to destroy someone's reputation with fabricated context, and we need to be ready to stop her." He watched Victoria leave the copy shop, her face smug with anticipated victory. She had no idea what was coming, and neither did Emma. But in less than 24 hours, they would both find out. Nathan just prayed that when the dust settled, there would be something left to save. What do you think of Victoria's scheme? Will Nathan be able to save Emma? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. The morning arrived too quickly. Nathan hadn't slept. He'd spent the entire night coordinating with his legal team, his security team, and his PR department. Reynolds had delivered everything he'd asked for: documentation of Victoria's misconduct, evidence of the falsified complaints, records of her previous terminations at other companies. But Nathan knew it might not be enough. Victoria's accusation, however twisted, contained a kernel of truth. He had deceived Emma. He had kissed her while hiding his identity. He had used his position, even if she didn't know about it, to get close to her. The facts could be spun either way, and Victoria was betting that the public would believe the worst. At 6 a.m., Nathan's phone rang. It was Reynolds. "Sir, we have a problem." "What now?" "Victoria didn't wait for your deadline. She sent copies of everything to 3 local news stations and 2 tabloid websites. The story is already spreading." Nathan closed his eyes. "What's the headline?" "Billionaire CEO poses as worker to seduce single mother." They're running with Victoria's version of events. And Emma? They named her, photos and everything. Her face is all over the internet. Nathan felt sick. Emma was about to wake up to the worst day of her life, and it was entirely his fault. "Get me a car," he said. "I'm going to her apartment." "Sir, the press is already gathering outside the warehouse. If you show up at her place..." "I don't care. She shouldn't find out about this from the news. She should hear it from me." 20 minutes later, Nathan pulled up outside Emma's apartment building. His heart was pounding as he climbed the stairs to her floor. He knocked on her door. No answer. He knocked again, harder. "Emma, it's Nate." Please open the door. Still nothing. Then finally the door opened a crack. Emma stood there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. She'd been crying. "I know who you are," she said, her voice flat. "I saw the news." Nathan's heart shattered. "Emma, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. "That you're Nathan Hartwell? That you own the company? That everything, every single thing, was a lie?" "Not everything. What I felt for you, what I feel for you, that's real." Emma laughed, but it came out as a sob. "Real? You watched me cry about money while you had billions in the bank. You let me pour my heart out about struggling to feed my kids, and the whole time you could have written a check that would have solved everything. I wanted to help you without you knowing who I was. You wanted to play a game." Emma's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face. "You wanted to be the hero, the secret prince who saves the poor little single mom. Well, congratulations, Nathan. You got your fairy tale, and I got humiliated in front of the entire country." Nathan stepped forward. "Emma, Victoria did this. She's the one who leaked everything, who twisted the story." "I don't care about Victoria," Emma shouted. "I care that you lied to me. I told you things I've never told anyone. I trusted you. Her voice broke completely. "I was falling in love with you." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. "I was falling in love with you too," he said softly. "I am in love with you. That's why I couldn't tell you the truth. I was terrified that if you knew who I really was, you'd look at me differently, that you'd see the money instead of me. So instead, you let me find out from the news?" Emma wiped her eyes angrily. "Do you know what they're saying about me? That I seduced you for money, that I'm a gold digger who targeted the CEO. My neighbors are looking at me like I'm trash. My mother called crying because she saw my face on TV. I'm going to fix this. I'm holding a press conference today. I'll tell everyone the truth. The truth is that you're a liar." Emma's voice was cold now, all the heat burned out of it. "The truth is that I don't know you at all. I thought I knew Nate, kind, thoughtful, hard-working Nate who understood what it was like to struggle, but he doesn't exist, does he? He was just a character you played. He wasn't a character. He's who I really am, underneath everything else." Emma shook her head slowly. "I don't believe you. And even if I did, it wouldn't matter. Because you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. You made that choice for me, Nathan. You decided I couldn't handle knowing who you were. You treated me like a child who needed to be protected from reality. That's not... I think you should go." Nathan stood frozen. "Emma, please, give me a chance to make this right. You've had chances, dozens of them. Every day we talked, every time I asked you about yourself, every moment we spent together, those were all chances, and you chose to lie every single time." She stepped back, her hand on the door. "I need you to leave. I need to figure out how to explain this to my kids, how to go back to work knowing everyone's seen those photos, how to rebuild my life after you and Victoria tore it apart. I never meant to hurt you, but you did." Emma's eyes met his one last time. "Goodbye, Nathan." The door closed in his face. Nathan stood in the hallway for a long moment, staring at the peeling paint on her door. He could hear muffled sobbing from inside. He'd done this. He'd taken the one good thing in his life and destroyed it with his own hands. But he couldn't fall apart. Not yet. Emma was still in danger. Her reputation, her job, her entire life was being dismantled by Victoria's lies. Even if Emma never forgave him, he had to save her. He pulled out his phone and called his PR director. "Move up the press conference. I want it in 2 hours." "Sir, that doesn't give us much time to prepare." "I don't need preparation. I need a microphone and a camera. Make it happen." 2 hours later, Nathan Hartwell stood in front of a wall of reporters and cameras. He'd showered, shaved, and put on a suit for the first time in weeks. He looked like the billionaire CEO everyone expected, polished, powerful, in control. But inside, he was anything but. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "I'm here to address the stories that have been circulating about me and about Emma Reyes, an employee at our Detroit facility." The reporters leaned forward, hungry for scandal. "First, let me be clear about who originated these stories. Victoria Sinclair, the former regional manager of our Detroit warehouse, leaked this information as an act of retaliation after learning she was about to be terminated for misconduct." Nathan clicked a remote, and the screen behind him lit up with documentation. Over the past 6 months, Ms. Sinclair created a hostile work environment that drove away dozens of good employees. She implemented unrealistic quotas, slashed break times, and retaliated against anyone who spoke up. 17 formal complaints were filed against her, all of which were improperly dismissed. He clicked to the next slide. "When I went undercover at the Detroit facility, I witnessed Ms. Sinclair's behavior firsthand. I watched her humiliate workers in front of their colleagues. I saw her target vulnerable employees, including Emma Reyes, a single mother who Ms. Sinclair specifically identified as a weak link she wanted to eliminate." The room was silent. Nathan continued. "Ms. Sinclair discovered my identity last week and attempted to blackmail me. When I refused to comply, she fabricated a narrative designed to destroy both my reputation and Ms. Reyes's. She took photos of a private moment between two people who genuinely care about each other and twisted it into something sordid." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "So let me tell you the real story. Yes, I went undercover at my own company. It's something I do regularly, a tradition my father started to understand what life is really like for our workers. Yes, I met Emma Reyes during that time, and yes, I developed feelings for her." Nathan's voice softened. "Emma Reyes is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. She works 60 hours a week to support her 2 children. She never complains, never cuts corners, never treats anyone with anything less than dignity. When Victoria Sinclair humiliated me in front of 200 workers, called me useless because she thought I was just a warehouse employee, Emma was the only person who came to check on me, the only person who showed basic human kindness." He took a breath. "I fell in love with her. Not because I was targeting a vulnerable woman, as Ms. Sinclair claims, but because Emma Reyes is extraordinary. And I made a terrible mistake by not telling her who I really was. That mistake hurt her, and I will regret it for the rest of my life." Nathan straightened his shoulders. "But here's what I won't regret: firing Victoria Sinclair. As of this morning, she has been terminated for cause. We're also pursuing legal action against her for harassment, blackmail, and defamation. Additionally, we've launched an investigation into Charles Whitmore, the regional VP who hired Ms. Sinclair despite her documented history of misconduct." He looked into the cameras one final time. "Emma Reyes did nothing wrong. She is not a gold digger or an opportunist. She's a hard-working mother who got caught in the crossfire of a vindictive former employee's scheme. I ask that you respect her privacy and her family during this difficult time." Nathan stepped back from the podium. "I'll take a few questions." The room erupted. "Mr. Hartwell, are you and Ms. Reyes in a relationship?" "Ms. Reyes has made it clear that she needs space. I intend to respect that." "Do you regret going undercover?" "I regret not being honest with Emma. I don't regret trying to understand what life is like for my employees." "What happens to Ms. Reyes's job?" "Her job was never in jeopardy. She's one of the best workers we have." And effective immediately, I'm implementing company-wide policy changes to ensure that no employee ever faces the kind of treatment Victoria Sinclair inflicted on our Detroit team. Mr. Hartwell, are you in love with Emma Reyes? Nathan paused. The question hung in the air. Yes, he said quietly. I am, and I hope that someday she can forgive me for the mistakes I made. He walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted follow-up questions. It was done. He told the truth, defended Emma, and exposed Victoria. But as he climbed into his car and drove away from the press conference, Nathan knew that none of it mattered if Emma couldn't forgive him. The news cycle moved fast. Within hours of Nathan's press conference, the narrative had shifted. Victoria Sinclair's history of misconduct became the story. Former employees from her previous companies came forward with their own tales of harassment and retaliation. Legal experts weighed in on the strength of Hartwell's case against her. But Nathan wasn't following the news. He was sitting in his car outside Emma's apartment building, trying to work up the courage to face her again. His phone rang. It was his assistant. Sir, Victoria Sinclair was just arrested. She tried to leave the state and the police picked her up at the airport. They're charging her with blackmail and criminal harassment. Good. Make sure our lawyers cooperate fully with the prosecution. There's something else, sir. Emma Reyes came into work today. Nathan sat up straighter. She did? Yes, and she asked to see you. Nathan's heart nearly stopped. Where is she? Conference room B, but sir, she doesn't look happy. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Nathan walked into conference room B. Emma was sitting at the long table, her hands folded in front of her. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, tension in every line of her body, but she was there. You asked to see me, Nathan said, closing the door behind him. I watched your press conference. I meant every word. Emma nodded slowly. I know. That's why I'm here. Nathan sat down across from her, maintaining the distance she clearly needed. I'm still angry, Emma said. I'm still hurt. What you did, the lying, the secrets, it's going to take me a long time to get past that. I understand. But I also watched Victoria get arrested this afternoon. I saw the evidence you presented. I talked to Mrs. Patterson and Darnell and Marcus, people who've worked here for years. And they told me what you've been doing. The policy changes you announced. The raises for warehouse workers, the new break schedules and realistic quotas. Nathan waited, afraid to hope. You didn't just defend me at that press conference, Emma continued. You defended everyone. You used your power to actually help people instead of just protecting yourself. That was always the goal. I just got distracted along the way. Emma almost smiled. Almost. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. I'm not ready to trust you again. But I'm willing to try. Slowly, carefully, with no more lies. Nathan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying for days. I can do that. I can do whatever you need. I need time. I need space, and I need you to be honest with me, completely honest from now on. Even when it's hard. Even when you think the truth might hurt. I promise. Emma stood up and Nathan rose with her. I'm going back to work, she said. The real work on the warehouse floor. I don't want special treatment. I don't want people thinking I'm getting ahead because of whatever this is between us. You've never needed special treatment. You're the best worker in this facility. Then let me prove it, on my own terms. Nathan nodded. Okay. Emma walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. Nathan? Yes? She turned to look at him. For the first time since the news broke, there was something other than pain in her eyes. Something fragile and tentative, but real. Thank you. For what you said at the press conference, for defending me, for... Seeing me. I'll always see you, Emma. That was never a lie. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once and walked out. Nathan stood alone in the conference room, feeling like he'd just been given a gift he didn't deserve. A second chance. He wasn't going to waste it. The next few weeks were a study in patience. Nathan returned to his normal duties as CEO, but he made regular visits to the Detroit facility, openly now as himself. He walked the warehouse floor, talked to workers, listened to their concerns. He implemented every policy change he'd promised, and then some. Emma kept her distance, but Nathan noticed her watching him sometimes. Evaluating, trying to reconcile the man she'd known as Nate with the billionaire CEO making speeches about worker dignity. He gave her space. He didn't push. He didn't send flowers or gifts or grand gestures. Instead, he showed up, day after day, being the person he'd claimed to be all along. Victoria Sinclair's legal troubles mounted. The blackmail charges were just the beginning. Former employees filed civil suits, and the district attorney was considering additional charges related to her conduct at previous companies. Her career was over. Her freedom was in jeopardy. Nathan felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only relief that she could no longer hurt the people he cared about. One evening, about a month after the press conference, Nathan was leaving the Detroit facility when he spotted Emma in the parking lot. She was standing by her car, the same one he'd secretly had repaired all those weeks ago, looking at the sunset. He almost walked past, almost gave her the space she'd asked for, but something made him stop. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, nodding toward the orange and pink sky. Emma glanced at him, then back at the sunset. "I used to watch sunsets with Diego. He said they were God's way of reminding us that endings can be beautiful too." Nathan moved to stand beside her, careful to keep some distance between them. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was." Emma's voice was soft. "He would have liked you, I think. The real you, not the disguise. I'd like to think I was always the real me, just with different clothes." Emma laughed quietly. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh since everything fell apart. "The boys asked about you," she said. "Marco remembers you from that one time you drove me home. He called you Mom's friend with the nice truck." Nathan smiled. "I'd like to meet them properly someday, if you'd allow it." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking," she finally said, "about trust, about what it means to really know someone." Nathan waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I knew Nate for a few weeks. I thought I understood him, his kindness, his patience, his way of making me feel like I wasn't alone." Emma turned to face him. "But I didn't know Nathan, the billionaire, the CEO, the man with the power to change hundreds of lives with a single decision. They're the same person. Are they?" Emma studied his face. "Because Nathan has responsibilities I can't even imagine. Pressure and expectations that would crush most people. A whole life that has nothing to do with warehouse floors and night shifts. You're right. Nathan's life is complicated, but Emma..." He took a small step closer. "The man who fell in love with you wasn't playing a part. He was being himself for the first time in years. Everything else, the money, the company, the public persona, that's the costume. What you saw was real." Emma's eyes glistened. "I want to believe that." "Then believe it. Let me prove it to you, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Just let me be there. Let me show up. Let me earn your trust the hard way." The sunset painted them both in shades of gold and crimson. Emma looked at him, really looked, and Nathan saw something shift in her expression. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay? Okay, I'll let you try." She held up a hand before he could respond, but slowly. "And if you ever lie to me again about anything, We're done. Permanently. I understand. And you're not buying me things or paying my bills or secretly fixing my car. Nathan winced. You figured that out? I'm not stupid, Nathan. The timing was way too convenient. Fair enough. No secret help. And one more thing. Emma stepped closer, close enough that Nathan could smell her shampoo. If this is going to work, you need to know that I'm not with you for your money. I don't want it. I don't need it. If we're together, it's because I choose you, not your bank account. I know that. I've always known that. Emma nodded. Then slowly she reached out and took his hand. It was a small gesture, nothing like the desperate kiss they'd shared in this same parking lot weeks ago, but it meant everything. Walk me to my car, she asked. Always. They walked together across the parking lot, hand in hand, as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was still hurt to heal, trust to rebuild, complications to navigate. But it was a beginning, and for Nathan Hartwell, that was more than enough. What do you think of Nathan's press conference? Will Emma be able to fully trust him again? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories. 6 months had passed since the parking lot sunset. 6 months of patience, of showing up, of proving day by day that the man Emma had fallen for was real. Nathan kept every promise he'd made. No lies, no secrets, no grand gestures designed to sweep her off her feet. Instead, he offered something far more valuable: consistency. He visited the Detroit facility twice a week, not to check on Emma, but to connect with the workers he'd come to know during his undercover stint. He remembered their names, asked about their families, listened to their concerns. Marcus joked that Nathan was the first CEO in history who actually knew how to operate a forklift. With Emma, he moved at her pace. Their first official date was coffee at a diner near her apartment. Her choice, not some fancy restaurant. They talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his father, about the loneliness of inheriting an empire, about the failed marriage that had left him convinced he'd never find real connection. She told him about Diego, about the car accident that had taken him, about raising twin boys alone, about the fear that she'd never be enough for them. You're more than enough, Nathan said. You're everything. Emma had smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. You're getting better at this. At what? At being honest. Their second date was a picnic in the park with Marco and Lucas. Nathan had been nervous, more nervous than any board meeting or investor presentation had ever made him. But the twins had taken to him immediately, especially when he'd revealed he could do magic tricks with coins. Do it again, Marco demanded, bouncing up and down. Say please, Emma reminded him. Please do it again. Nathan made the coin disappear and reappear behind Lucas's ear. Both boys shrieked with delight. Emma watched them with tears in her eyes. Later, when the twins had run off to chase ducks, she turned to Nathan and said, They haven't laughed like that in a long time. Neither have you. No, she agreed. Neither have I. The third date was dinner at Rosa's house, Emma's mother. Rosa had been skeptical at first, eyeing Nathan like he might be a con artist despite his very public identity. But when he'd insisted on helping with the dishes and complimented her enchiladas with genuine enthusiasm, she'd warmed up. You're not what I expected, Rosa told him while Emma was putting the boys to bed. What did you expect? Someone flashy, someone who thinks he's better than us because he has money. I learned a long time ago that money doesn't make anyone better, just luckier. Rosa had studied him for a long moment. Then she'd nodded, as if he'd passed some invisible test. Don't hurt my daughter, she said. She's been through enough. I won't, I promise." The months continued to pass. Nathan and Emma grew closer, their relationship deepening into something neither of them had expected. She learned to see past his wealth to the man underneath, the man who still thought of himself as Nate in his quietest moments. He learned to let her in, to share the burdens he'd carried alone for so long. They had their struggles. Emma sometimes pulled away when the weight of his world felt too heavy. Nathan sometimes slipped into CEO mode when she needed him to just be present. They argued, made up, learned each other's rhythms, but through it all, they kept choosing each other. One evening, about 8 months after they'd officially started dating, Nathan took Emma to the warehouse where everything had begun. "Why are we here?" she asked as they walked through the empty facility. It was after hours, the machines silent, the vast space echoing with their footsteps. "I wanted to show you something." He led her to the spot where Victoria had humiliated him all those months ago. The same platform, the same staging area where 200 workers had watched him be called useless. "This is where it started," Nathan said. "Not just the investigation, not just Victoria's downfall. This is where I first saw you." Emma looked around, remembering. "I was standing over there by the conveyor belt. You were the only one who came to check on me after. Everyone else pretended nothing had happened. But you walked over and asked if I was okay. Anyone would have done that." "No." Nathan shook his head. "They wouldn't. That's what made you different. That's what made me fall in love with you." Emma's breath caught. They'd said those words before, "I love you," but there was something about hearing them here in this place that made them hit differently. "Nathan." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes went wide. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago." Nathan lowered himself to one knee. "Emma Reyes, you saw me when I was nobody. You treated me with kindness when everyone else looked away. You taught me what it means to be truly known by another person." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a massive diamond, but a simple band with a modest sapphire stone. "This was my grandmother's," Nathan said. "She was a factory worker before she married my grandfather. She always said that the best relationships are built between equals, not between a rich man and a poor woman, but between two people who see each other's worth." Tears were streaming down Emma's face. "I don't want to marry a warehouse worker or a single mom or any of the labels the world tries to put on you," Nathan continued. "I want to marry Emma. The woman who brings me food when I forget to eat. The woman who calls me out when I'm being an idiot. The woman who makes me want to be better than I am." He looked up at her, his heart completely exposed. "Will you marry me?" Emma stood frozen for a moment. Then she laughed, a wet, happy sound, and pulled him to his feet. "Yes," she said, kissing him. "Yes, you ridiculous man, of course I'll marry you." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood there in the empty warehouse, holding each other, crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," Emma whispered. "I love you too." Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "Always have, always will." Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type chocolate cake in the comments. Only those who've read this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. The wedding was held 3 months later in Rosa's backyard. Emma had insisted on keeping it small. No celebrity guests, no media coverage, no extravagant displays of wealth. Just family and friends, the people who actually mattered. Rosa's garden had been transformed into a paradise of flowers and fairy lights. White chairs lined a simple aisle leading to an archway covered in roses and greenery. The scent of her famous cooking drifted from the kitchen, where a feast was being prepared for the reception. Nathan stood at the altar in a simple gray suit, looking more nervous than he'd ever been in his life. Marcus stood beside him as best man, a choice that had surprised everyone except Emma. "You good?" Marcus asked quietly. "Terrified," Nathan admitted. "That's how you know it's real." The music started. Not a grand orchestra, but a single guitarist playing a song Emma had loved since childhood. The guests turned to look as the back door opened. First came Lucas carrying a small pillow with the rings. He walked with intense concentration, determined not to drop his precious cargo. The guests chuckled at his serious expression. Then came Marco, scattering flower petals with the enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who'd been given permission to make a mess. Petals flew everywhere, on the chairs, on the guests, in his own hair. He grinned proudly at his handiwork. And then, finally, Emma appeared. She wore a simple white dress, elegant but understated, nothing like the designer gowns Nathan could have bought her. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers picked from Rosa's garden. She was the most beautiful thing Nathan had ever seen. Rosa walked beside her, beaming with pride. When they reached the altar, Rosa kissed Emma's cheek and placed her hand in Nathan's. "Take care of her," Rosa whispered. "With my life," Nathan promised. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They'd written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the garden by the time they finished. "Nathan," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "When I met you, I thought you were just another warehouse worker. Tired, a little lost, maybe hiding from something. I had no idea how right I was about that last part." The guests laughed. Nathan smiled through his tears. "But here's the thing. I fell in love with that person, the one who showed up every day and worked hard and treated everyone with respect, the one who listened when I needed to talk and held my hand when I needed support. I didn't fall in love with a billionaire. I fell in love with a good man who happened to have a really big secret." She squeezed his hands. "You've shown me that it's possible to be broken and still be whole, to be scared and still be brave, to make terrible mistakes and still deserve forgiveness. I love you, Nathan Hartwell, all of you, the CEO and the warehouse worker and every version in between." Nathan had to take a breath before he could speak. "Emma," he said, "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my connections, my name. I learned to keep everyone at a distance because it was safer than letting them in." He looked into her eyes. "And then you came along. You didn't know who I was, you didn't care, you just saw a guy having a bad day and decided to be kind. That single act of kindness changed everything." His voice cracked. "You taught me that I don't have to earn love, that I don't have to be useful or powerful or successful to deserve it. You saw me at my most useless, literally according to Victoria, and you chose me anyway." Emma laughed through her tears. "I promise to be honest with you, always. I promise to show up even when it's hard. I promise to love Marco and Lucas like they're my own because as of today they are. And I promise to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me." The officiant, a friend of Rosa's from church, smiled at them both. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nathan, you may kiss your bride." Nathan pulled Emma into his arms and kissed her while the garden erupted in cheers. Marco and Lucas ran forward, wrapping themselves around their legs, and the four of them stood there in a tangle of arms and happy tears. A family. Finally. The reception was joyful chaos. Rosa's food was a hit. Enchiladas, tamales, rice and beans, and a tres leches cake that Nathan declared the best thing he'd ever eaten. Marcus gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Mrs. Patterson, who had traveled from Detroit for the wedding, told embarrassing stories about Nate's early days on the warehouse floor. As the evening wore on, Nathan found himself standing at the edge of the garden, watching Emma dance with her sons. The fairy lights sparkled around them and music drifted through the warm night air. Rosa appeared beside him holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You did good," she said, handing him a glass. "I got lucky." "Luck had nothing to do with it." Rosa clinked her glass against his. "You fought for her. You waited. You proved yourself. That's not luck, that's love." Nathan watched Emma spin Marco around while Lucas tugged at her dress, demanding his turn. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly. "She always was. She just needed someone to remind her." Emma looked up and caught Nathan watching. She smiled, that radiant full-body smile that still made his heart race, and waved him over. "Go," Rosa said, "to dance with your wife." Nathan walked across the garden and took Emma's hand. The boys ran off to find more cake, and suddenly it was just the 2 of them swaying together under the stars. "Happy?" Emma asked. "More than I've ever been." "Good." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They danced in silence for a while, content just to hold each other. "So what happens now?" Emma asked finally. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're still a billionaire CEO. I'm still a warehouse worker with 2 kids. Our lives are completely different." Nathan pulled back slightly to look at her. "Our lives are whatever we make them. I don't care about the differences, I only care about being with you. But practically speaking, I've already promoted you." Emma's eyes widened. "What?" "You're the new head of employee relations for the Detroit facility. Better hours, better pay, same co-workers. You'll be implementing all the policy changes I announced, making sure workers are treated fairly." "Nathan, I never asked for—" "I know, that's why I did it. You're the most qualified person for the job. Everyone respects you. And you'll finally be using that management certification you worked so hard for." Emma stared at him, speechless. "Unless you don't want it," Nathan added quickly. "I can rescind the offer. I just thought—" She kissed him, cutting off his words. "Thank you," she said when they parted. "For seeing me. For believing in me. For everything. Thank you for giving me a second chance." The music changed to something slower and they pulled each other close again. Around them, the party continued. Rosa laughing with her friends, Marcus trying to teach the boys card tricks, Mrs. Patterson telling more stories to anyone who would listen. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. "I have one more surprise," Nathan said. "I don't know if I can handle any more surprises. You'll like this one, I promise." He led her to a quiet corner of the garden where a small bench sat beneath a flowering tree. "Sit," he said. Emma sat, looking at him curiously. Nathan pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It was a website for a charitable foundation. "The Diego Reyes Memorial Fund," Emma read aloud. Her voice caught. "Nathan, it's for Hartwell employees facing financial emergencies, medical bills, housing crises, unexpected hardships. The fund will provide interest-free loans and grants to help people get through tough times." Tears were streaming down Emma's face. "Diego believed in helping others," Nathan continued. "You've told me that 100 times. How he'd give his last dollar to someone who needed it more. I wanted to honor that. I wanted his memory to mean something." Emma couldn't speak. She just pulled him down onto the bench beside her and cried into his shoulder. "Is this okay?" Nathan asked anxiously. "I should have asked first. If it's too much—" "It's perfect," Emma managed. "It's absolutely perfect. He would have loved this." They sat together under the flowering tree, holding each other while the party continued around them. "I love you," Emma whispered. "I love you too. Forever." 1 year later, the Hartwell Logistics Detroit facility had been transformed. Gone were the impossible quotas and slashed break times. Gone was the atmosphere of fear and exhaustion. In their place was something Nathan had worked his whole career to build. A workplace where people actually wanted to be. Emma had thrived in her new role. She'd implemented mentorship programs, created pathways for advancement, and established an open-door policy that workers actually trusted. Employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high. Turnover had dropped to almost nothing, and the Diego Reyes Memorial Fund had helped over 200 families in its first year alone. Nathan still visited the facility regularly, not undercover anymore, but as himself. He walked the floor, talked to workers, listened to their ideas. Some still called him Mr. Hartwell. Others, the ones who'd known him as Nate, just called him by his first name. He preferred that. On a sunny afternoon in June, Nathan stood in the warehouse watching a familiar scene unfold. A new regional manager was addressing the staff, someone Emma had personally recruited, someone who understood that treating people with dignity wasn't just good ethics, it was good business. Emma appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his. "You're thinking about that day, aren't you?" she asked. "What day?" "The day Victoria called you useless." Nathan smiled. "I think about it sometimes. Not with anger anymore, just perspective. She's serving 3 years, you know. The blackmail charges stuck. I heard. Any regrets?" Nathan looked at his wife, at the woman who had changed his life with a simple act of kindness, at the mother of his children because Marco and Lucas were his now, legally and in every way that mattered, at his partner, his best friend, his home. "Not a single one," he said. The new manager finished her speech, a speech about respect, about teamwork, about building something together. The workers applauded genuinely, not out of fear, but because they believed in what she was saying. "We did good," Emma said softly. "You did good. I just signed the checks." She elbowed him. "Don't sell yourself short. You're more than your money, Nathan. You always were." He kissed her forehead. "Took me a while to believe that. Good thing I'm patient." They walked out of the warehouse together into the sunshine. Nathan's car was waiting, not the old truck from his undercover days, but not anything flashy either. Just a practical SUV with 2 car seats in the back. "Pick up the boys from school?" Emma asked. "Already on it. Then dinner at your mom's?" "She's making enchiladas." "Best news I've heard all day." They drove through Detroit, past the neighborhoods Nathan had come to know during his weeks living as Nate. Past the diner where he and Emma had their first date. Past the park where he'd met Marco and Lucas for the first time. At a red light, Emma reached over and took his hand. "Hey," she said, "hey. Thank you." "For what?" "For being useless." Nathan laughed, a full, genuine laugh that came from somewhere deep inside. "Anytime," he said, "and anytime." The light turned green and they drove on together into their future. Epilogue. 5 years later. The annual Hartwell family picnic had become a company tradition. Every summer, employees from all facilities gathered with their families for a day of food, games, and celebration. There were bounce houses and face painting for the kids, live music and dancing for the adults, and enough barbecue to feed a small army. Nathan stood by the main stage watching the chaos with a smile on his face. Marco, now 11, was leading a group of kids in some kind of elaborate game involving water balloons. Lucas was right beside him as always, the two of them inseparable. And running between them, shrieking with laughter, was their little sister. Isabella Rosa Hartwell, age 3, had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. She'd been a surprise, a wonderful, terrifying, life-changing surprise, and Nathan couldn't imagine existence without her. "Daddy! Daddy, look!" Isabella came running toward him, her face covered in chocolate from the ice cream stand. She held up a wilting flower she'd picked from somewhere. "For you," she announced. Nathan scooped her up, ignoring the chocolate that transferred to his shirt. It's beautiful. Thank you, sweetheart. Emma appeared beside them, shaking her head at the mess. I leave her alone for 5 minutes. She's perfect, Nathan said, kissing Isabella's chocolate-covered cheek. Just like her mother. Flatterer. Truth-teller. Rosa joined them, immediately taking Isabella from Nathan's arms. Come, mija. Let's get you cleaned up before you ruin Daddy's shirt even more. Too late, Nathan called after them. Emma laughed and slipped her arm through his. Happy? It was the same question she'd asked on their wedding night. And his answer was always the same. More than I've ever been. They walked through the picnic, greeting employees and their families. Nathan knew most of them by name now, not because he'd memorized a list, but because he'd taken the time to actually know them. Marcus waved from the barbecue station where he was holding court over a massive grill. Mrs. Patterson was teaching a group of kids how to fold napkins into swans. Darnell, now a shift supervisor, was showing off pictures of his new baby. You know what I was thinking? Emma said as they walked. What? About how different things would be if I'd gotten into the right car. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? That night after Victoria humiliated you. If I hadn't stopped to check on you, if I'd just gone back to work like everyone else. Nathan considered this. I'd probably still have fired Victoria eventually. Found out about the misconduct through other means. But we never would have met. Not really. No, Nathan agreed. We wouldn't have. Emma stopped walking and turned to face him. Around them, the picnic continued, kids laughing, music playing, families enjoying a beautiful summer day. I'm glad I stopped, she said simply. Me too. He kissed her, right there in the middle of the crowd. A few employees cheered. Marcus Wolf whistled from the barbecue station. Emma laughed against Nathan's lips. Get a room, Marco shouted from across the field. Mind your business, Emma shouted back, still laughing. Nathan pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heart beat against his chest. I love you, he said. I love you too. Even though I'm useless, Emma grinned. Especially because you're useless, it's very endearing. They rejoined the party hand in hand, surrounded by the family they'd built, not just Marco and Lucas and Isabella, but the hundreds of workers who had become part of their extended community. Nathan thought about the journey that had brought him here, the loneliness of his old life, the failed marriage that had convinced him he'd never find real connection, the decision to go undercover, to see his company through the eyes of its most vulnerable workers. And Emma, always Emma, the woman who had seen him at his lowest and chosen kindness, who had given him a second chance when he didn't deserve one, who had taught him that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but how they treat the people who have nothing. Hey, Emma said, squeezing his hand. You're thinking too hard, I can tell. Just grateful, he said, for all of this, for you. She smiled, that radiant smile that still made his heart race after all these years. Come on, she said, tugging him toward the dance floor where a band was starting to play. Dance with me, always. They danced together under the summer sun, surrounded by laughter and music and love. And Nathan Hartwell, the billionaire who had once been called useless, knew that he was the luckiest man in the world, because he had found someone who saw him. Really saw him, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. What did you think of Nathan and Emma's love story? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories, and check out more inspiring stories by clicking right here on the screen.